We have Domi from the Columbia University School of Professional Studies, so right here at Columbia University in New York. So despite being in the same city, we're on opposite sides of the camera for today. And I'm really looking forward to this one, which is on empowering collaboration in asynchronous problem-based learning. So a lot of concepts in there that we hold near and dear at this conference thematically, and I'm looking forward to it. So I can turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and share your screen at your convenience to get started.
All right, everyone. Yep, we're also from Columbia. I know that you guys have a role in hosting this, and so it's really wonderful. And we're very honored to be here with all of you, and at this wonderful event. I wish I had a lot more time because there were many presentations that I missed, and I'm hopeful that they're all recorded and accessible later. So
everything is being recorded, so they'll all be there. Great. You'll have full access.
Fantastic. Okay, just on our next slide. So we're going to introduce ourselves. For myself, I've been working in higher ed for the past 15 years in various capacities. I was a college instructor in New York City. I founded an open education startup, and currently I'm an innovation expert in educational technology working for Columbia University School of Professional Studies in particular. In my previous career, I was a professional architect. Don't ask me how I got from there to here, but there is a real thread there. So currently my work focuses on the design of teaching and learning environments that make effective and meaningful use of technology. So I think like a designer, I always have been, and we're basically prototyping and piloting solutions, different types of solutions to different types of problems.
Hey everyone, my name is Camilo Irizzary. I'm an instructional designer at Columbia University's School of Professional Studies. I work closely with Domi and Cassie. I've been with the team since February of 2020. Prior to working at Columbia, I was an instructional designer at New York University Center for Academic Excellence and Support. I've worked with faculty on various course redesigns, faculty development workshops, instructional support, all helping to improve the learning experience for both students and faculty. Most recently, I've been working at SPS developing the Masters in Wealth Management program at Columbia, one of the first fully online asynchronous master's programs.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cassie Scannella, and I've been in this field for a little over 5 years now altogether, and I'm currently also an instructional designer with Columbia University School of Professional Studies. I have been with the university since January 2020. I started just a couple of weeks before Camilo did. So currently, my focus has been on developing the other asynchronous program, insurance management, at the School of Professional Studies, which is also the second, like wealth management, it's also a fully online asynchronous program. Previously, I've worked at other institutions in Boston and New Jersey, and I have a master's in curriculum and instruction, concentrating in adult education.
Next slide, please. So the three of us, just to situate the three of us within our own school, we all belong to the online curriculum and instruction unit. This unit is composed of 4 teams, each with their special focus and expertise. We work very closely together, and collaboration is definitely key to our success. This year, we were very honored to receive the school's Team Impact Award. We basically got all of the courses, all of the Columbia SPS courses online, as others did, for remote instruction in over a week, and made sure that everyone could finish their courses. And in addition, we're a Quality Matters institution. So, and all of our IDs, all of our instructional designers are required to become QM certified. And lastly, a little bit for those who don't know about the School of Professional Studies at Columbia. We offer 17 master's programs in various modalities: asynchronous, online hybrid, and face-to-face HyFlex. We enroll approximately 1,200 new students every year. They're all adult learners and mostly working professionals, mostly early and mid-career professionals. We also have executive cohorts. 47% of our students are international. And then we also offer some certificate programs, a high school program and an American language program that's been around for a really, really long time. So just to go over now what we're hoping to cover, we'll be sharing our experience on 3 main topics: what problem-based learning, or PBL, at SPS looks like, what our educational technology strategy currently is for supporting PBL in asynchronous environments, and how we're able to use student data insights to iterate instructional design and technology implementations that support PBL. Now I'm going to turn it over to Cassie and Camilo, who will be sharing their experience as designers of problem-based learning at Columbia SPS.
So what is problem-based learning? So problem-based learning, also known as PBL, is a teaching method in which complex real-world problems are used as the vehicle to promote student learning of concepts and principles as opposed to direct presentation of facts and concepts. In addition to course content, PBL can promote the development of critical thinking skills, problem-solving abilities, and communication skills. It can also provide opportunities for working in groups and for finding and evaluating research materials and lifelong learning. So with PBL, students typically tend to work on a project over an extended period of time. And this can range, depending on the course and depending on the program, this can range from a week up into an entire semester. So there's a lot of, there's variety there. And then the project is something that engages them in solving a real world problem or answering a complex question. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first two programs to use the Pdl framework are insurance management and wealth management. And these are both the brand new asynchronous programs that just launched this past fall of 2020. There's some similarities between the two programs. The cohort size is very similar between 18 to 21 students in each program. And the demographics in each program typically include working adults at various professional levels. This can range anywhere from 5 to 25 years of experience. Professionals seeking career advancement and leadership opportunities. Those looking to apply real life experience to their schooling as well as vice versa. And the nice thing is that PBL provides all of these opportunities for the students. I'm going to pass it over to Camilo now.
Yeah, problem-based learning was actually introduced to SPS by senior leadership, specifically by the Dean, Eric Nelson, who's got a strong passion for problem-based learning. So there's been a lot of top-down support in implementing that into both of these programs. So there are three main players in our process. Those are the program directors, the faculty, and the students. Each face their own set of responsibilities and challenges. Program directors have to balance working with all faculty members in the program, scheduling onboarding, and working within other administrative factors for the university. They must keep the temperature of the student experience in the program. So they're constantly checking in, seeing if what the students are experiencing is reaching up to par for the program. The faculty, many of whom are teaching for the first time, have different needs and challenges of their own. Both programs tend to get comments from faculty regarding the amount of work it takes to build a course. Again, these are first-time lecturers for the most part. Most faculty members work full-time job as professionals in their field, and managing this balance while staying on track with our development timeline has been one of our biggest challenges in designing these programs. Some ways that we've tried to mitigate these challenges has been establishing templates to create a quicker workflow and doing our best to find course associates or TAs that can assist faculty with navigating the learning management system in particular. These programs are being created using a 3-month design cycle. And each course we want to focus on 3 key milestones. The first being syllabus development, the second being LMS design with a unique asynchronous approach. And lastly is our quality assurance period, where we're checking to make sure that all the bells and whistles of the course are working appropriately. Some of the challenges we face working with new program directors and faculty on the instructional design side is that because they have no expertise in teaching, they often don't have any expertise with the learning management system. So to mitigate this, we have to provide opportunities for them for training, onboarding, workshops, working through the design process, and teaching them all the functions of the LMS, or at least making sure that they have opportunities for training in that, because they will be working in it extensively when the course is in delivery.
So students also face several challenges as well. Time management is one of the main challenges students face with PBL, especially in the asynchronous setting. Collaborating asynchronously to work in groups across time zones kind of goes hand in hand with that time management piece. It's also something that students really are finding that they're facing challenges with as well. Collaborating within a range of professional experience levels. This is interesting because there's definitely pros and cons to this. And in fact, the program director for insurance management, who I work very closely with, shared a story rather recently that there's the youngest professional in the insurance management program. She said he always tends to be the first to complete all of the work and assignments, just always done. And he likes to work ahead, especially because he's one of the younger ones in the cohort, and he personally has time to do so. He doesn't have as many obligations at home and so forth. So this can sometimes be challenging because he doesn't take the time to fully understand and engage and learn the material for each module. So there's definitely some setbacks to that. So that's definitely something that's been addressed as pros and cons, especially because, like I said earlier, it's such a wide range of experience levels. Differentiating academic and professional learning environments. This is interesting because students sometimes tend to push back at certain assignments and content questioning, content questioning its instructional value, when that's really not their expertise. That's more on us to give them that. So, academic and professional have different approaches to teaching and learning. For instance, students talk about sometimes they're facing redundancies in content, depending on what the course from time to time. Redundancies is subject matter based on individual teaching priorities and styles. And sometimes, instructors will bring up, a topic in one course and then another instructor will bring it up in another course because they may have different points of views to offer. So there's definitely something there in terms of differentiating between those academic and professional learning environments. Okay, let me move on to the next slide, please. So there's some key characteristics of our PBL strategy. So from an instructional design perspective, there are several factors that we've kept in mind as we design this PBL experience. When we originally worked on this last summer, Camilo and I worked very closely. We've had a lot of meetings with folks higher up, as we mentioned, who had a lot of say in support behind these PBL experiences. So the number one thing that we wanted to focus on was the flexibility and adaptability of PBL. Something to keep in mind since these are, again, asynchronous programs and students are having, we have to keep in mind students are having a difficult time syncing schedules and scheduling synchronous meetings in order to get these projects done. So this is something we've kept in mind when we have developed our PBL strategy. Designing for group work, also very important. Designing for group work and collaboration. The group spaces are set up in Canvas with group discussion forums and a shared Google Doc, for example, but there are limitations in Canvas. One example is that discussions are linear and not very visually friendly to use. And this can be a challenge for students, especially when presenting a lot of material and a lot of research resources. We'll speak to that a little bit later too and talk about how we're bridging that gap and some of the tools that we have incorporated to help. Also, there's limitations in Canvas for the peer-to-peer evaluation. We want to provide opportunities for interaction and formative peer-to-peer evaluations, but we've also run into some challenges there that we'll speak to as well. And we also want to keep in mind the evergreen design to accommodate different teaching styles going forward. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, so the PBL framework. So keeping all of these characteristics in mind, then we developed a PBL framework. So we have determined that this is the best process for PBL at SPS based off of extensive research and so forth, and collaborations and so forth. So group PBL activities are broken into four main parts for each deliverable as follows. Part one, brainstorming the problem. This is where students will come together as a group. So students will be at this point either assigned to groups or asked to form a group amongst themselves, approved by the instructor, and students will come together as a group to brainstorm the problem they have been assigned to solve. Now, typically, there has been one main problem that, the courses that I worked on, it's been one problem for all groups to focus on. Sometimes, that can depend to varying on different courses. Part two is the resources. What are the resources and research that address the issue? This is where the instructor will give students some resources to start with and then provide information about them doing their own research. So at this point, students are in their groups, but then they will typically break out from their group and do individual research that was assigned to them probably from their group leader at this point. So then they'll break off from their groups and do their individual research based on what they've been assigned to do. Part 3 is where they come back together to assess the evidence. So this is where students come back together as a group and will discuss their findings from their individual research. Now, this is an interesting part because sometimes students at this phase tend to unravel further issues at this point, and then we need to actually take a step back and we have to repeat steps 2 and 3. So those 2 steps will need to be repeated. And this can actually occur multiple times, especially when solving a really sticky problem. So it's a good thing when, when we're repeating 2 of those steps. Finally, at the end, students will come back together and will work together to come up with the deliverable and the solution to the problem. And this can be anything. It can range from an oral presentation, a written report, a PowerPoint presentation. This is really up to what the instructor wants the deliverable to be. And then this is when students will come back together and submit that. So just to kind of recap, I think our biggest challenges in delivering PBL and delivering this PBL experience are the limitations of the LMS, notably as regards, to the system's less than ideal ability to support opportunities for interaction, informative peer-to-peer evaluation. So we'll talk about that further as we move on in the presentation. Okay, so this is our next step. So we actually created an activity in Padlet, and we have selected 5 questions with the hopes that at least one of them might be relevant to each of you in attendance. You don't have to answer all of these, but please feel free to do so. Answer as many as you want. So, we're going to give you a couple of minutes now so that you can access the activity in Padlet and you can become familiar with the Padlet. And at this point, we'll pause. Feel free to start posting or to get an idea of what this looks like to navigate it, and we'll check in to make sure that you are able to access it. There is a QR code here on the screen where you can access the Padlet. And I believe, I don't know if there's a link you can throw in chat.
Cassie, I can throw it into the chat.
That would be great. Thank you. And then now the link is now in chat. So please feel free to take some time to check this out, and we'll give everyone a few minutes. Just want to check in. Is anyone having any issues accessing the Padlet? Please feel free to reach out in chat if you're having any difficulties.
We're actually hoping to keep this Padlet, as it's called, alive and circulate it around for people who are working in a similar area to see if we could maybe gain some insights and support for the kind of work that we do. But this may not be the best tool, but it may not be bad. We don't know. This is an experiment.
Yeah, I mean, it seems interesting, actually. If we can encourage more people to do it, I'll try to answer some too. I was busy sort of following the other things, but
yeah, it's pretty great because we can use, you can share resources, you can share web-based resources or other types, audio files, I mean, all kinds of different files. So it's, I think, a pretty versatile tool in terms of posting shared resources or shared information. Can't do a lot more than that, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a nice tool. It looks nice, actually. It looks nice too.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes
Someone
we
in the
actually design discussions also with that when it's appropriate. And we're trying to sort of create an interest in that approach because students often have difficulty with the threaded discussions in Canvas. They get lost, and essentially the ones that start off the discussion end up dominating the conversation. So
yeah, and I've seen that in my own class, Sarah, as well. That or the conversation just kind of drops off and doesn't really continue. I mean, I've a lot of people who are just kind of, some people who work, some people who are full-time graduate students, and everything in between, and things kind of take on a life of their own for a little bit, and then if they drop off, it's going to be days before you kind of get people back. Sometimes we do have someone in the chat who says they're having difficulty. I think maybe
saw
with the
that.
Padlet. If there's more, if there's anything more you can.
I'm not quite sure. There's because the only two choices are the link, the URL, and the QR code.
Right. Yeah, I use the link. The link gets me there fine for me.
Mm-hmm. And all of you will appear as anonymous, by the way. That's kind of the way the system works. So feel free to say all kinds of things.
Right. Exactly. We'll see how we think about that in a few minutes. But no,
don't hold back.
Exactly. No, that helps. See, that helps already. I think that may have encouraged people to contribute, and because your names appear, so I think that made people think that it should be up here. So there we go. Okay, here we go. Here comes some things that are flooding in a little bit. Yeah, separate, not the key discussion right now, but I am sort of surprised in some ways that the discussion forums of the type that are in Canvas, whoever, haven't been really, improved since, I don't know, since the days I used to kill time on internet news groups when I was writing my dissertation, basically.
Right.
And it's, which is a really long time ago.
Yeah. It's they're pretty. They're pretty barbaric in my opinion. But so that's one of the things that we're very interested in is the whole, as a general topic for education technology and instructional design. So Camilo, we may need to move on. I think we'll be coming back to this Padlet and maybe surfacing some of the points or comments or questions that people put in there at the end. So we'll have a little bit of time to come back to it.
Great. And if people do want to continue to add, they can certainly feel free to do so while you're talking. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Anyway, I hope that you have an idea of the context that we're working in and designing in. And now we want to tell you a little bit about some of the tools that we're using to support problem-based learning. All right. So yeah, following up from what Cassie was saying about the limitations of our LMS, and by the way, we love our LMS, but I think, a learning management system is first and foremost a learning management system, not a learning experience system or a learning design experience. So it's, it does some things really well in terms of managing the, student faculty relationship and grading and all these kinds of things. But from there, we're a little bit on our own, which is why all these LTI technologies have come to sort of dominate the use of Canvas, and we're no different from other schools in that regard. Our overall educational technology strategy really prioritizes activity design. So although we do have some, a number of technologies that we think of as our core stack technologies like Zoom and Canvas and all that, we're also very focused, and I am in particular, on which activities need a different kind of support that the LMS cannot give them. So that's why I work very closely with the IDs on the course development. And it used to be that we would be called in more as consultants. Like 3 or 4 years ago, we were called in more as consultants towards the very end of the design cycle, when people said, hey, do you have any tools that we can use? And that approach, in my experience, doesn't work very well. It's much, much better to work hand in hand with the instructional designers and to understand what the issues are or what the goals are, and to see how we can work together to support them. In the case of the PBL projects, the curriculum priorities are collaboration, interactivity, individual reflection, and peer-to-peer evaluation, as you've heard. And so we looked at a series of technologies for this application, and we're going to share a little bit more about those. So let's see where we are here. Okay, so we were using, sorry, I got a little bit lost here. So we're going to talk about Padlet and feedback fruits. So we're using a series of different technologies for PBL. We're using Miro, we're using Padlet, we're using Feedback Fruits, which we're going to talk about. And what else are we using? Yeah, some other oddballs like ePortfolio Visualizer and others that are specific to wealth management. But Padlet, just a tiny bit about Padlet. It's a popular tool with both faculty and staff, and we now have an institutional license. We were using it to support 2 different types of activities in these asynchronous programs. Group-based research on the one hand, where students share links and other resources as they explore topics in the early stages of their PBL work. And then also, we got some pushback from students regarding Big Blue Button, which is another technology I forgot to mention that we use to facilitate synchronous meetings between students who have to work together. And because many of them are learning, across time zones and are far flung, some of them are having trouble meeting synchronously. So we created a Padlet that would be that is both synchronous and asynchronous in its capabilities, and it would allow someone, for instance, who was not able to dial in to sort of upload their the work that the group required them to do, and to review what everybody else did without losing track of everything. So it's just one step above a Google Doc with tons and tons of comments, but it does facilitate the group work. Not all groups actually chose to use it, but a few of them did. So we find that that's useful. Anyway, next. So we wanted to talk a little bit about Feedback Fruits. Feedback Fruits is a Dutch company. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them. They have a suite of tools that are very, very focused on peer evaluation of various different kinds, as well as interaction with content. So interactive video, interactive audio, interactive documents. We just started using Feedback Fruits last year. We're really in pilot stage, evaluating it. But so far, we're actually really excited by the kinds of activities and interaction that they enable. Feedback Fruits itself was born out of a collaboration between faculty at 2 universities in the Netherlands who decided to join forces to solve their common challenges. And so we, when we're dealing with Feedback Fruits, we're dealing with other educators, and that's sort of rare in the vendor arena. Anyway, one of the things that we're very excited about, in addition to what I've mentioned, is the fact that they have a very high level of compliance with web accessibility standards. So that puts us on the right foot. Next slide, please. So what we did was we decided to set up a peer review assignment. It's called a group member evaluation. And we've had 2 different experiences with that in both programs, and I'll try to describe them succinctly. It's designed to help students grow their collaboration skills, including learning how to provide constructive professional feedback. It also allows the instructor to gain insight into group dynamics and individual contributions. And it's always the case in group work that you've got some that are driving the process and others that are sort of coming up from behind and maybe relying a bit on the leaders in the group. That would be quite normal. So we developed a rubric to facilitate the peer-to-peer feedback. And the wonderful thing about this group member evaluation tool in Feedback Fruits is that you can use any kind of rubric. They're extremely easy to set up. I've actually never had an easier time setting up a tool. And I think we actually have 2 faculty members who have actually, skipped onboarding and are having a great time using these tools. So it's also, I think that they're easy, to use both from the student perspective and the faculty perspective. But anyway, the rubric that we initially chose is based on the DISC framework, which you may or may not be familiar with. DISC is an acronym that stands for Dominance, Influence, Steadiness, and Compliance. It's a non-judgmental personality and behavioral framework widely used across the corporate world to improve teamwork, communication, productivity. Now, our students were introduced to this during orientation, so we thought it might be a good thing to be able to leverage that introduction in the course. And so what we did on the first round of work, and now this is almost like ancient history, it was last fall, but the same assignment is given a few times in the course and again over several courses where they're working in different groups. We're still fine-tuning the best moment to give the assignment, but we've also learned many, many things that will impact how we're going to go, move forward with this, type of assignment. So the assignment itself has 3 steps: a self-assessment and a peer evaluation, and an anonymous peer feedback review, and then thirdly, an individual reflection. Next slide, please. Well, actually, before I get on to that, nope, I'll just keep going. Okay. So now I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the data insights that Feedback Fruits affords. These have been extremely useful in understanding engagement, but also in monitoring individual and group performance. We've also used the data. We would have regular meetings with the instructional designer and the program director and faculty if available, and myself every few weeks after, within a few weeks after an assignment ran, a Feedback Fruits assignment ran, in order to download and debrief what exactly happened. And these students, being graduate students and professionals, really like to push back. So we listen to them, but we also listen to the data. So I'm going to share a little bit about the data. The first time that we ran the very first time that we ran, the assignment, we noticed that we had some low data points around students who had actually read the feedback that their peers had given them, and also around the writing of the reflection, which was originally meant to be the most important part of the whole, assignment. PBL at SPS really prioritizes, reflection as an important step in the process. So in this example, the data showed less than ideal outcomes, as I mentioned. And after discussions, we were able to tweak the assignment to improve it. So we were able to make comments associated with peer reviews optional. Students, it seems as though students were not using them to full effect. We started noticing some, a lot of cutting and pasting of comments. Students are very efficient in that sense. And we also split due dates between the first 2 parts before, the self-assessment and the peer review, in order to allow more time to review the feedback and to reflect. So that yielded pretty good results in insurance management program. But in the wealth management program, the students, actually, if you could go to the next slide, please. Sorry. Camilo, are you on the next slide? Yeah. So you can see that the data points improved quite a bit, actually, from those tweaks. We went from 47 to 79% with regard to students reviewing the feedback that they received, and from 42 to 79% regarding completion of the reflection component. But in wealth management, we learned a number of other things this semester, because this first ran in insurance management last fall, and it ran for the first time in wealth management this spring. The wealth management students basically pointed out to us what we had already suspected, which is in a group of 4 or 5, anonymity is pretty impossible to maintain. And these students really prioritize their networking during the time that they're in the program. So they really are not prepared, and they're not really willing to be very honest with their peers, because they feel it's going to impact negatively on their networking and on the, on the collegial friendships that they and professional friendships that they make while they're in the program. So they actually sent us instructions on how they think that we should design this assignment, which was, I don't think I've ever received that before. This goes back to something that Cassie was saying earlier. You should design it like this, and it should have this, and these should be the questions. And so, but we're open-minded, and so we listen to them, and actually we sent them back something that's very similar to them, to that, but we're actually going to use a different Feedback Fruits tool to affect that. So for wealth management, we're going to go from individual evaluation to everyone in the group evaluating the group. So, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever keeps our students happy. But we can, on the next slide, we can show you some excerpts from the student, reflections. We were actually very pleased. I'll just give you a second to read that. Essentially, these these comments really helped us to know that we were achieving some of the goals and the purpose of the assignment. So, you know, even if students were harumphing and complaining, sometimes, you know, it was maybe 2 or 3 out of the 18. But with these program directors being extremely sensitive to the fact that these are new programs and with their ear very close to the ground in terms of the student experience, those 2 or 3 had, you know, a lot of airtime, let's say. But I think we got them into the fold in the end, so that's a good thing. On the next slide, please. And this is where we also, you know, had someone actually put in writing that they thought that anonymity might not, you know, work so well in a small group, but that doesn't invalidate, you know, the assignment. So really the point of what I'm trying to share is that being able to have data insights as an assignment is being delivered is extremely valuable. We don't really have any tools that, you know, allow us to do that. You can actually go into the assignment and with a simple click on you know, get a downloaded CSV file that you can organize in any way you want, so that since we did see some rumblings here and there, we were able to respond to them and to change some of the settings, as you saw, and really make sure that we position this to, you know, to optimize the student experience. Going forward, we're actually going to do some different things. As I mentioned, we're going to use a different feedback fruits tool for the wealth management program, but I think we're also coming to the conclusion that we should have a family of rubrics, and that the rubrics should be more closely aligned with the PBL assignment, which is a bit challenging when projects are only 2 weeks long. But we still feel really strongly that, you know, our students, even though they're hesitating to give each other constructive feedback, it's an extremely important skill in business and in the corporate world where they are all headed. So we're going to find maybe more ingenious ways of doing that by really taking a look at the rubric again and seeing how we can leverage a different approach to helping students feel safe, you know, being honest with one another. So one possibility is to not make any of these anonymous, and then to say, you know, what can you say to a group of 4 or 5 people in a professional context that's respectful and helpful. So anyway, that's where we've left off with that, and we've got a lot of conversations going on, and we're very happy to have had a lot of you know, participation from the program directors and the faculty. But actually the faculty in the insurance management program have been able to reinforce the value of this assignment to the students. And so the outcomes on the insurance side are extremely positive. Mm-hmm. The outcomes on the wealth side are pretty good, but the faculty essentially are missing from the picture. They somehow got the impression it wasn't their assignment. So one of our challenges is to bring them back on board with this assignment and to see, you know, to convince them that it's worth their time. So I'm going to pass it back to Camilo.
Yep. So towards the end here, we're actually going to navigate back to the Padlet page. So feel free to use the QR code or the link in the chat once again. But basically what we want to do now is have an open discussion. And if you are having some sort of difficulty navigating to the Padlet, please feel free to post or ask us questions in the chat. And, you know, we're looking forward to some back and forth with the crowd here.
All right, no, fantastic. No, thanks so much. No, hopefully we can get some good discussion going on this, and the Padlet certainly helps. One thing the Padlet brought up for me, there are a couple of comments about, there's one about being disciplined in order to complete a course online. So it raised one thing for me, which is, I think what you've talked about so far has all been group-oriented, collaborative. Like it's all been, you know, people working with other people in some ways. Are there any self-paced online elements to the courses that you've put together? And if I did, I apologize if I missed any.
I'm going to throw that over to Camilo and Cass.
Yeah. Okay. I can try to direct my questions better. I don't know.
No. It's all good, David. No, that's a great question. So you do need a lot of discipline, and that's kind of like the nature of the course and how it's built, right? It's an asynchronous program. So the entire thing does require discipline, but that's also with the understanding that because it's asynchronous in nature, you are capable of working full time, right? Or taking care of other, other personal needs in your personal life, while also maintaining the balance of taking this course. So in terms of like self-pacing, we do like to present at the beginning of every module sort of like an overview and expectation of what the week is going to look like for the student, right? Whether that's they have to answer certain discussions on a certain day, or report back certain assignments on certain days of the week, right? So we kind of break the week up into kind of halves where, on Wednesdays and Thursdays, they have certain things that they have to submit in terms of deliverables. And on Sundays, there will be another set of deliverables for that week.
Okay. So you do have, so people do have they have obviously a lot of control over the time, but there are pretty frequent requirements or requests of people to keep them, but I think to keep away from maybe what the person is getting at in the comment, right? That it's a little easy,
Right.
If you say I've got a deadline in a month, it's like, okay, well, 3 weeks from now, I'm going to start thinking about it. Right. But it's probably a month of work, and that's where you run into trouble. So It sounds like that's a really nice way to keep people going. Do you get resistance from that? Like, do people feel that's, more regularity than they think they really can handle, even though I think it's probably going to be a good idea?
Speaking from wealth management, I haven't seen much resistance in terms of the self-pacing. I think it's been very welcomed by the students because all of them, from what I know, all of them were working full time. So they're able to come home at night and, take care of a couple of assignments, or wake up early, take care of a couple of assignments, or on their lunch hour, if they want to take care of a couple, or, wherever they find flexibility in their day to do so. And I think what we've benefited from is from having constant active engagement throughout the week, instead of like, just everything is due Sunday, see you next week, where you can kind of lose people, or, they find themselves in a situation where Friday, Saturday is like, oh my God, I have an entire week of work to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just to add to that, that's all like great points. We insurance management follows the same structure essentially, and we do have checkpoints in throughout the week. And the reason that we do like to have all major assignments due the Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is because we want to give students that entire week. Because like Camilo said, they're all working full time. They all have a ton of stuff going on. We want to give them that stretch just to make sure they're able to complete those larger assignments on time. But we also want to keep in mind that PBL, even though it's a group, the way that we structured it, even though it's a group activity, there are some individual elements to it where I think it's like step 3 is where the students are actually sometimes within their groups, they may assign each other deadlines within their own groups to actually go out and do their own research that's going to benefit in the long run. So they probably so within their group, they have their own individual deadlines to meet as well. So they're also trying to manage that workload, and they're also trying to manage that timeline as well. So that it's definitely, it definitely has its challenges, but that's really the group's responsibility then to hold each other accountable for their individual contributions.
Right. And you probably get something out of the social pressure there too, right? I mean, it's there's something to that. If a group relies on you, I think you're going to be more likely to, at least in most cases, respond a little bit more than if you're kind of on your own, and it's easy to kind of, especially during the pandemic, just easy to kind of get, drift away and get lost in sort of other things going on.
Exactly.
So,
I would say, just to add, that's part of the appeal of both of these programs, right? The fact that they can work asynchronously, because especially we all know what the situation has been the last 15, 16 months or so, but even during normal times, not everyone is in New York, or not everyone is willing to move to New York to take a master's program, so we do have some students that are in different places around the tri-state area, and even different time zones around the country.
Right. So there's some coordination there as well.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Did you find people, especially during the pandemic times, did you find people really appreciating sort of having some social interaction, feeling that maybe there's a way to prevent a little bit of isolation during these times?
Yeah, I think
Oh, go ahead, Cassie.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I definitely think that it helped. And I think that, it's interesting because these programs, even before the pandemic, these programs were already going to be designed asynchronously. So Camilo and I kind of got lucky where we didn't have a lot of, we were already designing for an asynchronous program. So I don't want to say, so the pandemic, because everything was shifting online anyway, we were already designing with that in mind. So I think just through the overall, the course in general, I think students enjoy that collaboration. I think that we really want to create that community where they're learning from one another and getting, because they're all coming in, like I mentioned earlier too, they're coming in with, they're spanning from 5 to 25 years of professional experience. They're coming in with there's such a gap and such a variety of different experiences within these programs where they can actually, we're finding out from these conversations too that they're really learning from one another and finding different ways to go about maybe different things at work or different things in their their real life situations. So that's what we want from this, and I think that providing those group activities as well is really enhancing that and helping with that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and certainly prepares you for real work in a way that traditional classes don't. And that we do some work in professional continuing legal education, and the thing that we consistently hear from law firms is, the one thing that people don't know how to do when they get out of law school is be a lawyer, right? And okay, and it's that they expect that they're going to spend the time at the beginning teaching people how to really do the job. They understand the theory, they understand how to write certain things, but they don't understand, how do you handle a client? What deadlines really matter? What do you really have to do? To get something to actually convince a judge. All of these things are, so many different areas are not what they're, the kind of experience that they have in school, even if they know sort of the foundational content. And so what you're doing, I think, is, you can see the translation to the actual job. You can see the application, which is, I think, one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're providing them with the leadership skills that they need in order to succeed, and the managerial skills to succeed through their years to come. So hopefully that's, they're getting that out of it too.
And
absolutely.
It's also interesting what in the end, even with the group member evaluation tool, the students, for instance, we had one student who consistently in her self-assessments consistently undervalued herself. Mm-hmm. And then she realized by the time she did the same assignment three times, that what it was really helping her to gain confidence in her abilities to do her work and to be a valuable group member and contributor. And it was someone who may not have found that out otherwise. And so there are, I think, a lot of benefits to peer evaluation, whether it's professional or group focused. And I think we need to help students overcome their discomfort in a way, because I don't think that reflection comes naturally to anyone. And even evaluating a peer, requires, reflection. It's a reflective act, really. And so, and I'm sure that others have found that at other institutions. It's a cultural, we don't necessarily have a reflective culture here. I'm not sure which cultures might be naturally reflective. I don't think it's I don't think we're born with it, put it that way. But it is extremely important to all of our undertakings, whether in a personal context or in a professional context, to be able to be self-reflective. And so I think the students in the end really did get that part of it. So we're happy about that.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, it does seem, I'm curious if someone else wants to weigh in from other countries. I do a lot of talks in other countries. It does seem particularly American to not have breaks, right? So maybe reflection is hard anyway, but to even have the space for it seems even more of a challenge in the US. There's just always something else to do. There's always something else that must be done. And there's sort of, it seems to be, that seems to be more ingrained in our culture than at least a lot of other cultures. And an extra challenge, I think. So building the space in for reflection and encouraging people to be comfortable reflecting are really huge accomplishments, and not in my experience all that common. So I think that's fantastic. We do have a few minutes left. Do you want to look a little bit at the Padlet and some of the other comments on the Padlet and see what a few anonymous comments that we got about online learning? We got the guess we kind of covered the scary of the fear of self-discipline. So we kind of got into that a little bit already. But the anytime, anywhere nature of it is something that people, I assume that's the exciting part rather than the scary part, or maybe it's both, I don't know. Arguments could be made.
Good point. Good point.
Right?
Could work either way.
Exactly. So I jumped to one conclusion. I was like, I don't know, maybe that's not the right conclusion to jump to. Reaching out to different areas and fields. Yeah, so grasping interest is scary. There's a comment there.
Yeah. I'm looking at the very last column, the first comment regarding online learning prior to the pandemic. Never realized how vital and dependent it can be during different circumstances. I think that's, pretty spot on. I think it's almost become, it's just, it's become the new, I don't want to say the new normal, but it's, it's something that if schools weren't doing it so much before, now I think that they have found why it's so valuable and why it can be such a valuable experience. No, I just think that kind of hits the nail on the head with that.
Yeah. I was looking at that comment also, Cassie.
Yeah.
There's that saying that, you never really know what you can do until you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, unfortunately, last year we were all put in that position where we had to do it. But I think many institutions have seen the benefit of it and the use of online learning and how powerful something like that can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also as a kind of PS to these comments, we do make a very strong distinction between remote instruction and online learning. And although, I would say that all these sort of face-to-face courses that ended up online were forced into remote instruction. But some of them will become interested in online learning, which means that some of those courses may become redesigned for either hybrid, at the very least, or online learning. And I think that's very exciting for our particular team because our focus is online learning.
No, absolutely. And I think it does raise another issue though, which is that there's a little bit of a perception to counteract now in some people, right? Because some people will, that's the distinction you made is not a distinction that everybody in the general public makes, right? So you hear, there was a headline in the New York Times just a day or two ago, and I actually didn't get to read the article because I would have been in front of this camera most of the time, but that, about, remote learning not, basically not working and, remote instruction with no plan, which was what people were forced into, is not going to be a big hit. But that clearly doesn't mean that no forms of online learning work, right? We can build really interesting simulations that people can do on their own that are fantastic and will work. We can design courses the way that you've designed them that are remote and asynchronous and can work and all of that. So there is, especially in this day and age, people read headlines and the takeaway from some of the pandemic learning is online learning doesn't work. And that's, we certainly in the field realize that that's not accurate, and that what they really mean is unplanned remote instruction doesn't often work, and people did the best they could, and that's all they could do. But there's something there in terms of, I think, how we, as a field, try to, help people recalibrate, help make it clear that there are a lot of different types of online learning, and that, the pandemic certainly did not prove that that's a failure, but rather, maybe help people see some things that could succeed that they didn't think could succeed, and opens the door for some other things and for other methods that we've already been, familiar with. So I think there was a positioning issue in there somewhere though, because there's people jump to conclusions a little bit quickly and don't necessarily, a lot of people grow up with traditional education and aren't familiar with other forms, and they didn't experience problem-based learning. They didn't experience, immersive online simulations, and these weren't things that they grew up with. So it's a lot to do sort of on the, the messaging side or something like that. Get that across. So, all right. Well, other questions from anybody else? I don't know if there's anything else we want to cover, just another minute or so, and then on to, for me, to the brief closing session, which, as you've seen, I've been keeping brief for all of us. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's, really appreciate the work that you've done and what you've accomplished and the philosophy behind it. And it's great to get a chance to talk with all of you. So I think on that, we can probably wrap up and hope to see you in person next year at the conference. We'll be back in Faculty House since you're at Columbia. So that's the plan. So really great to have you here.
Great. Really looking forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again. Take care. And then I'll see everybody back hopefully for the brief wrap up on the other link in just about a minute. So thanks again. I'm going to shut this session down and move on to the wrap up session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.